Should I leave him? Are you being true with yourself? Cause when you're giving me a dream, well, I go crazy when I see it. Will I make it? Together we'll be a young girl. I don't care what people saying. I'm gonna be there. Baby, I can't stop. I can't get enough. Baby, I can't stop. I can't get enough. When I see, I keep on smiling. I can't stop. When I see, believing, control. When I'm feeling, what I'm feeling. When I'm feeling, what I'm feeling, feeling, feeling. I go crazy when I see it. gets complicated when you gravitate towards yourself. On the other hand, it's hard to talk to anyone else. You can't help where your mind goes. So let's harvest on the moon with the autumn snow. Cause I've never had so much to gain and threw it all away. And if I ever had the chance again, I'll probably do the same. Singing, oh, I won't let you down. Singing, oh, I've left you behind. Open up to see your face. Watching yourself in your dreams like wide awake. Hoping you return my calls. Convince myself for my health that it's not my fault. Cause I've never had so much to gain and threw it all away. And if I ever had the chance again, I'll probably do the same. Singing, oh, I won't let you down. Singing, oh, I've left you never had so much gain or had so much to lose. And if I ever get past the shame and get through the bruise, singing, oh, I'll never let you down. Singing, oh, I never left the crowd.
haga despertar un jardín de pan y de poesía, porque puestos a soñar, fácil es imaginar esta humanidad en armonía. Vibra mi mente al pensar en la posibilidad de encontrar un rumbo diferente para abrir de par en par los cuadernos del amor, del gauchaje de toda la gente. Qué bueno, che, qué lindo es reírnos como hermanos, porque esperar
puts on aftershave to compensate for his ordinary shoes. She said, honey, take me dancing, but they ended up by sleeping in a doorway by the bodegas and the lights on over Broadway, wearing diamonds on the soles of their shoes. And I could say,
Good morning, everyone. We are live at the Ice House in Davos, one of 7 locations at the Hub Culture Leadership Campus here in Davos, featuring the Tech Lodge, the Chalet, the Terrace, the Leadership Lounge, the Ice House, and the studio. So many places for amazing conversations at this Davos. This year, the focus of Davos is about rebuilding trust. And this is the theme that we're seeing emerge across all the venues and conversations happening here. We're about to dive into our first conversation here at the Ice House, looking at a subject that we call equitable sustainability. What is equitable sustainability? It's a concept and an idea that emerged within Hub Culture last year at Climate Week in New York during the UN General Assembly. We did a conversation there at the Biodiversity Hub that looked at how equality and equitability can impact sustainability. And the outcome from that conversation was that as we move forward, sustainability isn't really sustainable if it doesn't address equality in the conversation. So we could kind of think about this as the idea of human sustainability. Sustainability has been very much a conversation about the environment, about our role as humans creating the Anthropocene, and the ability for humans to impact climate at large and to overuse our resources. The non-overuse of our resources is really a sustainable approach to things like consumption. But equitable sustainability takes us to another level. In many ways, the conversations around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, have been evolving toward this idea. And the conclusion that we came to that was then deepened at COP28 in Dubai at the Future Mobility Hub, where we continued this conversation, was that if you're not working to improve equality and equitability, then it's really not sustainable. So joining us now are 4 of our friends from Hub to have a deeper conversation about this idea of equitable sustainability. So here to my right is my old friend, Richard Robinson, who I've known since many years ago when Hub first began in Hong Kong in the early 2000s.
Congrats, you really did it. It's amazing.
Thank you. Richard is the entrepreneur in residence at Animoca Brands. So his perspective is going to be about how the Web3 digital metaverse can actually address some of these issues. Next in our lineup here is Monk Rinpoche. He is the founder and developer of an amazing project in Nepal called the Peace Sanctuary, which I know just broke ground, and I'm so excited to hear about that. His mission to bring peace to the world is anchored on a location, and his perspective will come from peace. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also, Jonas Lee, who's the Chief Commercial Officer of Carbon Capture Inc. Their company is moving really rapidly to take innovation and technology to bring carbon out of the atmosphere. So on the environmental front, we have a great environmental expert here to talk about the work you guys are doing.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much. And finally, Michael Sung, who's based in Shanghai and is with many things, not only funds in China, but also carbon sustainability. So Michael's going to be talking about the China perspective because 1.2 billion people are moving into the global economy from China, and how we're looking at bringing these people into the wealth and the prosperity that the West has enjoyed at large, but also how we're going to do that sustainably. So thank you guys for joining us. Let's kick off with Michael. Can you give us a little bit of perspective about the changes happening in China and what the Chinese leadership is doing to address sustainability and also to address the massive and rapid growth of consumption of resources by the population? We all know that we're already consuming a year's worth of resources by July. If we treble that by 2 or 3 or 4x, which is what's going to happen as the global south moves into kind of a prosperous, wealth-oriented consumer economy, we have a big issue. So I want to kick this off with, how do we bring equality and equitability and then still connect with sustainability when we have billions of people that need to be given a chance to prosper?
Yeah, so certainly China has a big challenge ahead with 1.4 billion people. thinking about how to grow the economy and move the middle class up and bring we call it common prosperity for all, but at the same time addressing the challenges of sustainability and a clean environment, right? So as you know, Xi Jinping has developed this a very aggressive green plan, green economy. At the UN a number of years ago, he stated one of the first to be carbon neutral by 2060, which is very aggressive for a huge economy of its size, which is still predominantly using coal and other things like this. So it's very aggressive, but the benefit of the Chinese system is that it's state planned, and it has what we call 5-year plans. Okay, so actually China has a roadmap going decades out in terms of how it's going to develop this a green economy, and you can actually point to 1.4 billion people to actually coordinate on that. So from that standpoint, China actually is, I would argue, world leading with respect to moving toward a clean economy. Okay, right now, for example, we're working with the Shanghai Environmental Energy Exchange, which has the mandate for the national ETS. So they're the earliest, they're the world's largest. It's already in operation. And at COP28, we were bringing delegations from China to look at how to now interface with an international ecosystem. So I think to answer your question, right, there's certainly challenges of how to do it. I would say China is taking a leading effort, but it has not been very internationalized yet, right? So right now, even though there's ETS carbon trading, it's all local, with local standards. And I think one of the key aspects is how we can actually move it to an international standard and connect it with the rest of the ecosystem. So one of the discussions at COP28, as you know, Abu Dhabi has just started its own carbon market, and actually is the first in the world to be able to create a regulated commodity out of carbon. But there's no real flow yet, right? So I think the opportunity here is how we can connect China and other developing countries in Global South to an international ecosystem, harmonize the standards of that. Think of it maybe even as a carbon OPEC type strategy, where each individual country has their own carbon strategy and own standards and own trading mechanism, and how can we harmonize across these things to create a global platform which will be more inclusive for everybody.
So I think that's great about carbon and carbon pricing. And when we come back to you, I want you to be thinking about how that's going to affect the life of the people, and how these sort of financialization of environmental or even carbon-based assets can actually improve the life of the populations that are thinking about that. So I want you to kind of noodle that for a second while we move now to Jonas. You guys are actually very much connected to this emerging world of carbon markets, because the product that you are essentially creating is carbon that can be then sold for the work of taking it out of the air. Can you give us just a quick view of carbon capture and why this has a potential to reverse some of the worst effects of what's happening with
Certainly. So we at Carbon Capture Inc., we make machines that basically suck in large volumes of air, like not air in a building, but atmospheric air outside, and remove the CO2 from that air, and then take that CO2 in a concentrated form and mostly bury it forever underground in specialized wells that are designed to hold that CO2 for thousands of years. And in that process, it's costly. It takes energy. It costs money. You have to maintain it. There's some steel, right? In order to pay for it, we need a source of revenue. So that revenue comes from two sources these days. The government, so the U.S. government today is helping to finance these efforts to get us off the ground, but it also comes from companies that are paying for a carbon removal credit, which typically is defined as a net. So after all the energy you use and all the other sources of potential emission, on a net basis, removing 1 ton of CO2 to create a carbon credit that a company or an individual or anyone could use to offset an unavoidable ton of emissions from another source. So I use those words carefully because they shouldn't be used to just do whatever you want and not worry about reducing your own carbon footprint through mitigation or other means or substitution, whatever it might be. It should be for what you really can't get to. And how we define can't is, that's another conversation, but some things are just really, really expensive when you get to the bottom of the barrel, or impossible. You can't fly a 747. Do they fly? I don't think they fly 747s. 7-something max these days. You can't do it without fossil fuels today, or at least sustainable aviation fuel. So you're going to have a carbon footprint that has to be mitigated in some way. And that's where what we do comes into play. And how it relates to Mike is that credit can be traded. So today we sell to Microsoft and to Meta and Alphabet. I got to get the names right. They seem to change. But we sell those credits directly today, but they can be, of course, banked and traded in different derivative instruments developed over time. So we're basically going to be creating the products that you trade. Obviously, you have other options today. I mean, what kind of things do you trade now?
Well, I think what we're starting with is the standard run-of-the-mill carbon credit, right? And I think the big challenge here, again, is internationalization standards, right? Because, for example, on the China side, they have what we call CCERs and they have their own standards. They're not quite recognized by the big players like Microsoft, whatever. So I think the first step is to move to existing gold standards, like Vera or Corsia or these kind of things. The second step, a much more challenging step, would be, okay, let's try to harmonize across a region, like Asia, let's say, and create an Asia rec or Asia centric thing, right? And then see how we can get fungibility across these standards. And that's a much more involved play, but we're going toward that. But to answer your question, we're also very interested in the sort of green derivatives, right, related to that. So we're setting up a carbon neutrality fund to invest into future forwards of carbon credits. And because they're forwards, we can actually mint them then to a more progressive standard, or some of the carbon principles that have been developed, that kind of thing, right? But then in addition to that, we can actually financialize these resources and create all sorts of derivative instruments, insurance instruments, off the base carbon that's generated. So there's a whole ecosystem that's coming up. It's relatively new, but it's very, very exciting. Yeah.
Great, guys. Thank you. So we've had this conversation on a little bit finance. We're talking a little bit about sort of earth tech. The human side of this, Monk Rinpoche, can your work is very much work of the heart, and it's also work of the hands, because you guys are building now a peace sanctuary that you've been all around the world talking about the last couple of years. Can you tell us about the focus of the result that you want from the sanctuary that you are building in Nepal? And how does that fit back to this idea of an equitable future for the citizens of our planet?
Thank you. When we talk about universal peace, and we are talking about human understanding of our value of being on this earth. So when you talk about sustainability, we are talking about the Mother Earth and the environment that we are right now living in, how this will be forever good for humanity. So to be able to truly realize the benefit from the environment that we are in, it is very important for us to have the understanding of our own life. Without understanding of our own life, even if we develop carbon neutral, so we are not necessarily going to be able to benefit from it, because there is no awareness which goes along with all the sustainability and equity, and so like a benefit that human beings must be able to obtain. So when we talk about universal peace sanctuary, we are talking about how we will be able to embrace our own basic goodness in a way that we are able to relish our achievement. And that is like our human life, our achievements, such as we are able to breathe, we are able to live in this very moment as a living being. So if we think about the living being, if we are alive, if we are truly being here in this very moment, we have to be able to truly realize the validity of this moment. That is more important than anything else. Instead of seeking validation from somewhere else, if we are able to realize how valid it is for us to be able to just breathe, when we realize that, then I think we have all reasons to work on sustainability and carbon neutral. And all these things are very, very important for us to be able to enhance our way of living. So peace sanctuary that I envision is something that will give us opportunity to experience true freedom and to be able to really have everything that we need, everything that we deserve to have, such as an environment that we can consider will be lasting forever, and like we are enjoying right now. And at the same time, we are able to truly experience our own human life in such a way that we find this is more valid than anything else. Grass is not greener at the other side of the fence. So that kind of quality that we want to be able to sort of inspire in everyone. So that is the peace movement that I'm working on. Of course, for that, and to help everyone to relate to that, we need a destination for all the peace lovers around the world. So I felt that it is very important to start the first such destination as Universal Peace Sanctuary in Lumbini, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, where a mother sacrificed her life to give birth to her child by being a responsible mother. So actually what you're talking about is how to be a responsible being when we talk about the sustainability. When we talk about so equality, so how to have productivity, how to have benefit from our being. So in that sense, Universal Peace Sanctuary is really something that everybody will be able to embrace, and everybody will be able to feel the ownership of this. So this is for me to offer everyone opportunity for their living legacy.
The living legacy of the breath and right now. I think that actually you've taken it right down to, for me, this is a learning process with these conversations on equitable sustainability. We're trying to learn and define and understand what it could mean. But I think you've just given us a beautiful gift, because the one thing that we all have in common that is equitable to us no matter what is our breath.
Yes.
And by bringing ourselves back to that breath as the common denominator for everything that we do, that may be the actual answer for equitable sustainability, the starting point from which everything can and should be built.
Yes, that's why the awareness of nowness is the most important thing. So when we have the awareness of nowness, I think we will be able to then really base everything on that, where we will be able to find ourselves very productive in whatever, in activities that we are involved in, such as what we are doing right now here.
And so is the sanctuary then designed to teach people how to experience the awareness of nowness?
You see, what I think is not so much to teach. Actually, the sanctuary is designed to inspire everyone to be able to naturally embrace awareness of nowness. So environment that we are creating where everybody will be able to activate their own intelligence in such a way that they are able to liberate themselves from all the sufferings. So at the end of the day, Universal Peace Sanctuary is to be able to truly give opportunity for us to be liberated from anything, liberated from difficulties, whatever kind of difficulties were. I feel that we have this ability innately. So however, most of the time now for thousands of years, we were not able to tap into that resources. So here I'm trying to bring that resources, in everyday life. So this is why, I'm here with you in Davos as well.
Thank you. It's always good to see you. Rich Robinson, entrepreneur in residence at Animoca. We were once very young together running around Hong Kong, and you were always doing great things and still are. We've talked now about finance, we've talked about the kind of earth sustainability, we've talked about the human side. Your work in the emerging metaverse and Web3 is very much building what I think of as the next layer of human experience. Certainly with Hub Culture, this is something that we're absolutely dedicated to with our work in metaverse, digital identity, AI. How do you see this emerging? Because one of the problems that we face right now as a culture is that, there's a lot of inequality in the general world. But in the online world, there is both tremendous equality, provided that you have access, and the most extreme inequality. So the ownership of the assets is in really the realm of fiefdoms. You have the FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, you have very few people, 0.00001% of the population controls the economic advantages of these resources. Many people get to enjoy them, but in Web 2, people talk a lot about fiefdoms and serfdom. We are all serfs in a land owned by a few kings. What are you doing to try to change that? And can you give us a roadmap for a better way forward?
Terrific. Stan Stallnacker, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing. Grüezi wohl. Guten Morgen. I used to be a ski bum here in Switzerland 30 years ago, and I love being in the now with Rinpoche, and I wish everyone at home or wherever you are could see what we see. Talk about being in the now in this environment and this beautiful blend of sustainability here in God's train set that is Switzerland. Everything is so well done. So we're actually helping to build out the Peace Metaverse for the Universal Peace Sanctuary. And I'd just like to share one anecdote about Rinpoche is that he's, very much not attached to outcomes, very much in the now, but doing a very ambitious and difficult endeavor. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from him. One day he told me, there's ups and downs. Things are not going so well with the Universal Peace Sanctuary today, but I slept very well last night. And I think that's a beautiful message, right? We all want to do things that are not easy, but be able to sleep like a
not every day goes well, but you
not every day goes well, right?
to-
But you should be able to be even keel, right, and have that inner peace. And then the next day it goes great, and then I'm going to sleep well too, right? So I think it's a beautiful message of just being in the now, control what you can, let everything else go, sleep like a baby, rinse, repeat, keep going. So Web3, I look at Web3 as my Act 3. I very much a red pill, like in the Matrix. I've taken this red pill with Web3. So Web3 is the internet of ownership. It is the tokenized version of the internet. And you said very well, we live in the shareholder society. There's shareholders, there's producers, and there's consumers. And I think that parallels very well to Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Web 1, 1990 to 05, it is read only. You can just consume the internet. Web 2, 05, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter launch. Now you can write on the internet. Now you can produce. That's another 15 years. And now Web 3, 2020 to now say, now you can read, write, and own. Digital asset ownership. And that is incredibly liberating, but more importantly, it is incredibly equalizing. It lets the value accrue across the whole network. So indeed, that is absolutely the way that we feel, is that we are digital serfs that are surfing on the internet. Lord Zuckerberg, house of Microsoft, order of Google, and we're toiling in the fields all of our time, all of our treasure, all of our data, and rides up in their horses with their soldiers. How many sweet potatoes? How many data points did you farm? Oh, 500 kilos of sweet potatoes. Or you can keep 5 of them and give us the rest. Oh, thank you, sire. Thank you. You get nothing and like it. And with Web 3, you are able to be in control of your data and your time and all of your digital assets. And that sounds great at a macro level, but there's a very good parallel. Like you think about sustainability. Hey, we're in the West and we have this amazing infrastructure and we have 2-car garages and we have, this amazing lifestyle. But you know what? All of the emerging market, like the other, let's say 5 to 7 billion people, sorry, you're shit out of luck. You guys have to dial it way back for the next few decades because we kind of overdid it and you can't really have this lifestyle or infrastructure that we have, right? In the same way that hey, the FANGs control, let's say 6 companies, hey, you want to launch a new company? You pretty much have to pay the big VIG and pay our gigantic cut for Apple or advertising on Google or advertising on Facebook, and then we're going to accrue all the power, all the value.
So how is Animoca, and you're an entrepreneur in residence, how is Animoca, or the work that you're specifically doing, helping to build that new world? Because we all know that the promise of Web3 is X. So far, the delivery of Web3 has been Y. And the Y is also in a way metaphysical, because there are a lot of questions about why, when it's in many ways more difficult to access.
Yes.
It's not something that everyone is easily able to do. Even 10 years into decentralized wallets and these different things, there's a lot of obstacles for people. Are you guys doing anything to break down those obstacles?
Absolutely. It's hugely important. People say that, well, I remember Web 1 when you had to get a modem and dial up and have the handshake, the browser plugins. That was a real pain in the ass. Web 3 is difficult. Web 3 is way more difficult than Web 1. And it still is, but that is being addressed. And right now, that infrastructure, I live in Bali, Indonesia, and one thing that I love to drink is called coconut kefir. They put this bacteria in the coconut, and it eats up all the sugar, and it just poops out this beautiful, just great stuff for your gut biome. And that's what's happening right now, is that entrepreneurs are going into this Web3 space, and they're eating up all the bad stuff, taking off all the burrs and edges, making it delightful, pooping out rainbows of glitter, just all of this, and that's going to happen. It's just inevitable, and it's all going to be addressed. I think right now, the way that, we're advocating the open metaverse and digital asset ownership for the masses. And why that is that important is because the vast majority of people, even if you are banked, even if you are financially literate, you really don't control your data, and you don't really have the ability to own digital assets. But think about gaming. So gaming is the tip of the spear. 3.4 billion gamers, largest community in the world, most of them in Asia, very comfortable with virtual items, many of them already own crypto assets as well too. And let's say music's about 40, 50 billion a year. Entertainment, TV and movies, let's call it 100 billion. Let's call it $150, 150 billion. Gaming's 250 billion. It'll soon be 500 billion. And the global economy is 110 trillion. Gaming will get close to 0.5% of the entire global economy. And to be able to take that and convert those in-app purchases, that about 50 billion of gaming is, I bought a hat for my avatar, I bought a sword, I have a spaceship, I have a horse, IAP to NFT, those non-fungible tokens, let's say 10%, that's a $5 billion industry just to start. Now you actually have ownership, and once you have ownership, then you have the ability to create this entire marketplace and ecosystem around that.
I mean, we've done a lot of work with Ultra and our tokenization platform around this whole idea of real world assets. We are in the process of tokenizing 2 real estate properties right now to enable our community to share ownership. Real world asset ownership and identity online is the key to, I think, making this real, because at the end of the day, we live in a physical world, and a lot of the value that we own and operate on for our own survival is based on that physicality. So can you give us another just quick minute on that link between real world assets and the tokenized virtualized world? Because I think when those two things become interlinked irrevocably, that is where the rubber meets the road in terms of actually driving value, real value, the ability to sustain your family, the ability to have a place to live, the ability to own resources that gain value over time. What's the obstacle on real world assets right now?
So first of all, digital identity, super important, and that's an initiative that we're driving with our NFT collection, Mochaverse, and the Mocha ID. And yes, real world assets are certainly important, indeed. But I would not discount the virtual assets that we've accumulated through our data. Data is indeed the most valuable commodity that there is, more than real world assets in many ways. Most of the valuable companies their foundation is built upon data. So starting with that, with virtual items in games, my sons, 20 and 18, all their time treasure is into gaming, but they don't own anything. They're really renting it. So just to be able to actually own that is a great first start. Next, I had dinner with a gentleman in New York at NFT NYC, and he led the sort of white paper for NFTs. An NFT, non-fungible token, he wrote, parentheses, NFT, or digital deed. And he thought, nobody's going to call it non-fungible token. And even NFT is a clunky acronym. It's probably going to be digital deed. And actually, I think it's very powerful to be able to attach real estate to NFTs. It's something that I'm looking to do in Bali as well too. And the ability in smart contracts to be able to attach all of the things to real estate that are now kind of fractured and decentralized and controlled by different government bureaucracies. Like that's a yes and, I think. I think both are super powerful.
I want to ask you one really quick answer. What percentage of a person's wealth right now do you think is digital versus physical? Whether or not we own it, or like in terms of like your value stack as an individual, what would you say right now is the relationship of that from a digital to physical standpoint? And then secondarily, how do you see that changing over the next few years? Like, do you think that ratio is going to change?
So that's interesting. So different age and stage, right? As you get older, you start acquiring more real world assets, more disposable income. I think we have to look to the demographic of my children, my sons in their 20 teens. I have an 8-year-old daughter as well too. Like, I would contend that they think of their assets as being digital. They think of their identity, and they think of being able to express themselves and being able to connect with people. It's almost entirely digital. And so it's probably I'm 56. I'm closer to 90 than I am to college. My friend recently reminded me, who turned the same age. And of course, my percentage that's digital is a little bit higher because I'm in the industry, but most people in my demographic, it's probably, single digits or perhaps, and it depends on how you define it as well too, because you could say that if you have cash or other assets, those are all digital, right? But I think increasingly so, it's going to be the vast majority of people's wealth in many ways. And you look in the Philippines with gaming, you look at Axie Infinity, it's the first time people got wallets. It was the first time people were earning money outside of the Philippines. It was the first time people were in a community. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Thank you. So back to Jonas, and then we're going to go back to Michael. I want to get a sense of what does sustainability look like a few years out? Like, if we're successful, unfortunately right now the track that we're on is for over 4 degrees of global warming, because we are continuing to pump more and more carbon into the atmosphere, and we are not doing enough to stop, like you mentioned, the introduction of atmospheric gases into the atmosphere. Your company has a plan to reduce that, but to get it to a scale that's going to actually bend the curve is going to be a little bit difficult. But what would you say is do you guys see a path for success on the carbon front and the climate front? I know you said to me before, we can solve this.
Yeah, for sure.
Most people in climate don't believe that we're on track to solve it at all. So what's your vision for how we're going to solve it?
So I'm going to take a little bit maybe of a counter opinion to that. I think we actually have been bending the curve quite a bit in the developed world. So if you look at carbon emissions on a GDP basis or even a per capita basis in Europe and also in the United States, there's been actually a surprising amount of progress that isn't really talked about too much. I think the World in Data is starting to do some good stuff on that front in terms of publicizing that. But the real issue, and if you look at where emissions are coming from, it's from the developed world growing. And we want them to grow. We want them to have a better life. We want them to come out of, as much as possible, out of poverty. We want them to have the same benefits that we've enjoyed in the Western world for a long time. But we'd of course like them to do it without as much emissions as we've put out there. So I would basically take issue with the fact that, let's fight. No, but it's we've made a lot of progress. I'm actually kind of personally surprised at how well we're doing. I know that's not everybody's position. So, the issue is how do we allow growth and prosperity in the developing world and still counter the emissions? And I think it's just going to take a bit of time, and it's going to take leadership from the Western world. There's this argument that we put a lot of emissions up there and everybody has paid our price. There's been exogenous effects from the wealth that we've accumulated. Okay, it's time to take some leadership and change that. So one of the arguments against spending a lot of money on carbon removal, of course, is, well, China's going to just, they got coal plants, and so why do we bother? We're just allowing them to pollute. Or India, actually, a lot of the future growth in emissions is going to come from India more than even China. Well, great. I mean, we went first. We got the benefits first. And I say we, the Western world. We should take leadership and solve the problem when it's expensive. So by the time the world starts really pumping out the amount of emissions that we know is coming down the pike, well, we'll have solutions in place that are not cost prohibitive for them to take up. So that's my perspective. I think, this, what's the term you said, equitable sustainability? I don't think it should be equitable right now. I think actually the Western world should take, I know I'm perverting the definition a little bit.
Let's go.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm perverting the definition a little bit, but sustainability by definition is equitable in some ways because you're doing it so you have no impact on anybody else, right? So that's equitable, but who's going to pay for it right now? It's going to be the Western world and the ones that can. So in that sense, it's not equitable, and it shouldn't be for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different perspectives to look at this subject, so that's very interesting. Michael, it's not just about carbon, and it's not just about emissions. Sustainability at large is also about our management of resources. So when I think about sustainability, I'm also thinking about plastics in the oceans. I'm thinking about the fact that we're cutting down forests and creating, essentially biosphere like adaptation at large. I know, are thinking a little bit about biodiversity credits and this kind of thing. I personally have some reservations about the emergence of biodiversity credits because I'm afraid that we're going to end up in some kind of dystopian version of a Web3 meme world meets, financialization. So imagine like the worst aspects of the financial crisis in 2008 combined with meme coins, but all tied to like trees and butterflies. Can you give us some pointers on wider sustainability? Because emissions are really just a tiny part of what it actually means to be living sustainably on a sustainably, guarded planet. Any thoughts or suggestions on how we solve for all the other issues of sustainability?
Yeah, great question. I've been actually thinking about this deeply, and maybe I'll get a little provocative and talk about some of the thoughts that we're working on at my Institute of Digital Finance Innovation, right? So a story, I actually was on a UN Economic and Social Commission of Asia Pacific task force in Bhutan, okay, to help Bhutan come out of least development country status. They had to create a bond, and I was the digital finance expert to try to figure out interesting ways to have them grow up, kind of thing, right? And what was interesting was, as you know, Bhutan has this sort of gross happiness index, and so they have a way to measure happiness, basically, across 9 dimensions, and a few of them are, religious-based, but you can imagine a secular version of that. So what I had suggested at the time, which was quite provocative, was to create a commodity out of happiness, right? And that sounds kind of crazy, but if you look at what a carbon credit is exactly that, right? It's a commodity out of reduction of pollution, right? You created a social economic incentive to align private interest with public good, right? Because pollution is an externality, and but if you tax it and you create credits for people who actually reduce carbon, then you can create a social economic system that moves in the right direction, right? Now you can generalize that, right? Instead of just for pollution, why not we do it for all the SDG goals? Right, and be more inclusive across different types of sustainability. That's one answer. The other answer is tied to what Rich mentioned, right, is the whole Web3 thing, is the democratization of the technologies of access to be able to have ownership, to be able to produce. And digitization, the one thing that it does is that it makes it essentially free for everyone and erases all borders, right? That's what digitization of information did 20 years ago with the internet, and now we're digitizing value. Okay, so to answer the question that you had posed before, with the digitization of value, okay, and the means and productions of producing it, and the means and productions of financializing it. And to answer your other question about what the problem is, it's a legal regulatory problem. Okay, right now, all the tools on the technology side are able to digitize and tokenize real estate and carbon credits and all sorts of stuff, but it's not standardized, and the legal binding of that, as well as cross-jurisdictional aspects of that from the regulatory framework, are not there. But you can imagine technologies such as blockchain, being able to do all the tracking and tracing of the ESG and compliance and doing the right thing on that front. Then we have a very, very powerful way we can bring sustainability equitably to everyone, not just the Fortune 500 or the jet set here in Davos, but down to the individual farmer. If we can actually see what they can do and they can give value out of their carbon reducing things because it's digitized, and the cost of being able to deploy it or track it or enforce it goes marginally down to zero. And then whatever they produce can now be fungible across different regions all around the world. Then we're going to get to that nice endpoint. So I think we're early on. The standardization is not there. The global, I would say, handshaking is not there. But we're rapidly approaching what I think is a kind of a inflection point on that, which dovetails into a technology inflection point. And that merged together, I think, will get us somewhere significant.
Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap up this session here in just a couple minutes. I want to end with Monk Rinpoche to give us some guiding words on where we go next. Before I do that, I just want to let all of you guys know that we will be back on another live stream tomorrow morning at the same time, focused on NGOs and collaboration, bringing together some of the world's top NGOs here at the Ice House to talk about the plan for 2024. And if you're in Davos and you happen to be watching this, go to hubculture.com/events to see dozens of activities happening over the next few days and the 7 locations around the city, these hubs for climate, for AI, for technology, for leadership, the places where the work is getting done. Monk Rinpoche, send us home with a vision for an equitable future. We talked about the awareness of now.
So, equitable future is only possible if we start with a compassionate attitude. I think everything is dependent upon our motivation. It is very important for us to realize that we ourselves physically on this earth for a very, very short period of time. Our life is totally transient, and there is no guarantee that we are here on this earth tomorrow. However, as we are here on this earth, it is very important for us to value our human life so that we will be able to value everything around us. This is going to be able to create a sustainable environment, sustainable world, equitable as well. Because when we talk about attitude, when we talk about intention, it is very important for us to not to condition everything so that we are able to truly benefit from our unconditional way of living. By living unconditionally, I think there is a possibility for us all to understand each other and find clarity in our mind and find peace in our heart. So this is the way to move forward. And here in Davos, now we are talking about trust and a relationship that we are creating with everyone, including AI. So I feel it is very important for us to now doctrinate AI to have compassionate heart and a compassionate mind, which is to say that we must be able to activate our own intelligence so that AI will be also able to work intelligently. So then we don't have to fear and AI is going to destruct or AI is going to destroy anyone, because this is how we have inspired AI. So for us today here in Davos, this is the first day. So it's very important for us to do everything that we can to inspire everyone to celebrate life and take the journey of life together.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So I think the lesson from this is that equitable sustainability starts with you right now. It starts with all of us, and that compassionate approach, may that be our theme of Davos this year. Maybe this can be the compassionate Davos. Thank you so much. We will see you online for more conversations all over Hub Culture. And thank you again so much to our friends at SABIC and McDonough Innovation, the 8th year of the Ice House, reusing the same materials in a circular economy. A vision, it's an icon here in Davos, and always an amazing collaboration working with our friends who have a vision for not only a compassionate, sustainable, but beautiful future. And may that be the destiny of the sanctuary. May it be the destiny of the carbon we're putting under the ground. May it be the destiny of the metaverse. And even for these financial markets that Michael's talking about, like maybe we could find some compassionate financial markets out there. Thank you so much. We will see you again soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Esta humanidad en armonía. Vibra mi mente al pensar en la posibilidad de encontrar un rumbo diferente para abrir de par en par los cuadernos del amor, del gauchaje de toda la gente. Qué bueno, che, qué lindo es reírnos como hermanos. ¿Por qué esperar
his own aftershave to compensate for his ordinary shoes. She said, honey, take me dancing, but they ended up by sleeping in a doorway by the bodegas and the lights on over Broadway, wearing diamonds on so